Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Natalia Moczulska and this is the news. Surveys show that over 2/3 of Poles are proud of the aid we provided to Ukrainians. Help for Ukraine. Was it the most important event in Poland in 2022? I guess so, but let's look at the summary of the most important Polish socio-political events of this year, ending today. With Russia's attack on Ukraine on February 24th, Poland became a frontline state. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians sought rescue from the turmoil of war. Poles exemplarily passed the test of solidarity. Transportation, humanitarian aid, and accommodation were organized. Historical backstories were put aside. Ukrainian mothers, children, and the elderly found shelter in our homes. Huge humanitarian support also flowed to the fighting Ukraine. Since the beginning of the conflict, more than 8.5 million people have entered Poland from the Ukrainian direction. Admittedly, Polish people are doing a lot for us. On April 11th, the report of the subcommittee for the re-examination of the Smolensk air accident was presented. It found the presence of explosives on many elements of the Tu-154M plane. The research unequivocally invalidated that there was an assassination at Smolensk on April 10, 2010. It accurately identified the location, time, and sound of the explosion that destroyed the wing and ignited the crash. On April 20th, there was a series of methane explosions at the Pniówek coal mine in Pawłowice. 9 miners died, 30 were injured, 7 were declared missing. 3 days later, a similar tragedy occurred at the Zofiówka coal mine in Jastrzębie-Zdrój. 10 miners died. In mid-April, the law on homeland defense came into force. It allows for an increase in defense spending to 3% of GDP, as well as the use of extra budgetary funds for armaments. As a result of its arms purchases, Poland has a chance to have the strongest army in Europe within a few years. We want peace, so we are preparing for war. In the Polish Senate, on the other hand, a motion was presented in May after months of effort to waive Tomasz Grodzki's immunity and consequently bring corruption charges against him by the prosecutor's office. The upper house of parliament rejects the document. The speaker can still shield himself with immunity, which does not prevent him from suing journalists for reporting on the envelope scandal. Very many journalists have reached the materials and want to cover the story. On June 2nd in Warsaw, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announces the approval of the Polish National Reconstruction Plan. The disbursement of funds is made conditional on the achievement of so-called milestones. The impasse over the disbursement of funds continues. Work on the construction of a physical barrier on the Polish-Belarusian border was completed on June 30th. In the summer, there was an environmental disaster on the Oder River. In a stretch of several hundred kilometers, there was a mass fish die-off. In October, inflation reached a record high of 17.9%. The reason for such a high inflation rate, also observed in other countries, is the Russian war in Ukraine, the energy blackmail applied by Russia at the end of 2021, and the money that was pumped into the economy during the pandemic to keep jobs, for example. The past year was a landmark year in terms of the implementation of strategic infrastructure projects. The Vistula Spit cross-section was opened, as well as a gas pipeline connecting Poland and Slovakia. The company Central Communication Port signed agreements with contractors for the project worth nearly 10 billion zloty. Contracts were also signed for the construction of nuclear power plants in Poland. The opening of the Baltic Pipe pipeline, which has made us fully independent of Russian gas, should be considered the most significant project. Thanks to all these investments, also thanks to the foresight of the late Polish president, Professor Lech Kaczyński. On November 20th, the effects of the ongoing war in Ukraine affected us much harder than before. 2 Polish people were killed in Przewodów as a result of a shell explosion. Poland, both before and after the outbreak of war in Ukraine, provided significant military support to the country. Germany, previously considered a leader in Europe, presented the opposite attitude at first. This made Warsaw's importance grow in the eyes of the West, especially the United States. In late March, after the NATO summit in Brussels, U.S. President Joe Biden visited Poland. In turn, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, returning from his first foreign visit since the outbreak of war, met with Polish President Andrzej Duda in Rzeszów. It's hard to believe, but this war has been going on for almost a year. Today is the 311th day of Russian aggression against Ukraine. In fact, we have lived this entire year in the shadow of this war, watching images that people were not supposed to see again. The bestiality of the Russians, the killing of children, the murder of civilians carried out even for pleasure, and all the media, socio-technical manipulations of the Kremlin's lying propaganda have made Russia today an absolute evil. So what might an international summary of this year look like? It was a very sad year. Not only the Pope has passed away. On February 24th, Russia attacked Ukraine, a war that has reverberated throughout the modern world. We are all here. Our soldiers are here. Our citizens are here, and we are here. We are defending our independence. This is how it will look like.
Слава нашим захисникам, слава нашим захисницям. Слава Україні.
It didn't take long for the leaders of other countries to react. In early March, the European Union announced a third package of sanctions, in which it decided to cut off 7 Russian banks from the international SWIFT system. Sanctions were also imposed on the Russia Today station and the Sputnik agency.
The 3 sweeping waves of sanctions we have adopted, as well as the extension of their scope this week, have hit Russia's economy hard. The ruble has plummeted. Many key Russian banks are cut off from the international banking system. Companies are leaving the country one after another, not wanting to have their brands associated with the murderous regime.
At this point, the European Union has already announced 9 sanction packages that hit Russia's financial, energy, and technology sectors. The European Parliament has also decided to give Ukraine a record 18 trillion euros in 2023. The European Council has confirmed and supported the decisions that are underway. On the one hand, 18 billion euros in macro-financial assistance to Ukraine. This shows that the European Union stands firm on its commitment, its firmness, it keeps its word. We are very happy to report that we have also reached an agreement on the 9th package of sanctions against Russia. The year 2022 was also marked by major political changes. On April 24th, the second round of the French presidential election was held, with Marine Le Pen suffering defeat. Emmanuel Macron was elected for a second term. I think of those who voted for Madame Le Pen, who I know are disappointed this evening, because I am no longer the party's candidate, but everyone's president. Early parliamentary elections were held in Italy on September 25th after President Sergio Mattarella dissolved parliament. The conservative coalition headed by Giorgia Meloni was successful. She became the first woman in Italy to head a government. When this night is over, we must remember that we are not at the end point. We are at the starting point. Starting tomorrow, we must prove our worth. In November, Americans voted in midterm elections. Democrats managed to retain their majority in the Senate. However, Republicans gained the upper hand in the House of Representatives. Donald Trump also announced his candidacy for president.
I'm going to be making a very big announcement.
In particular, we saw political turmoil in the UK. After Boris Johnson resigned, Liz Truss became the new Prime Minister. The British politician held the post only for 45 days. Her place was taken by Rishi Sunak.
Given the situation, I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
Good morning. I've just been to Buckingham Palace and accepted His Majesty the King's invitation to form a government in his name.
The year 2022 will certainly be remembered by the British people for a long time. The British nation lost its queen in September after 70 years of her reign. Senior Pope Benedict XVI has died at the age of 95. He was the direct successor to John Paul II, and it was the Polish Pope who made German Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger Pope. Benedict XVI sat on the Holy See from April 19, 2005 to February 28, 2013. After stepping down, he spent his last years in the Mater Ecclesiae Monastery on the Vatican grounds. Today, the whole world bids him farewell. Joseph Ratzinger was born on Holy Saturday, April 16, 1927, in the village of Marktl in southern Germany. His family was deeply religious. Joseph's older brother, Georg, also became a priest. Both were ordained in 1951. Joseph Ratzinger received the episcopal sacrament on May 28, 1977, and became a cardinal just a month later. He held the office of prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith for more than 20 years, and was a close associate of Pope John Paul II. On April 19, 2005, he was elected his successor, taking the name Benedict XVI. During his pontificate, he made 24 foreign apostolic journeys. The destination of the second of them was Poland. In our country, the Holy Father visited, among other places, Auschwitz, where he prayed for the victims of the Holocaust. In his teaching, Benedict XVI paid great attention to the issue of the relationship between faith and reason, emphasized the merciful aspect of God, developed the idea of ecumenism, and always put the person of Jesus Christ at the center. On February 11, 2013, he officially resigned from the ministry of the Bishop of Rome. He cited advanced age, declining health, and fatigue as his reasons. Benedict XVI was the first pope since the 15th century to resign his office. He spent the last years of his life in the Mater Ecclesiae monastery in the Vatican Gardens, spending his days in prayer and reading. During this time, he sometimes met with Pope Francis. On Wednesday, December 28th, the Holy Father reported on the retired Pope's poor health, asking the faithful to pray for his intentions. Benedict XVI died today at 9:34 a.m. His funeral will take place on Thursday, January 5th at 9:30 a.m. in St. Peter's Square. Today, the whole world will welcome the new year. Let's see how New Year's Eve will be celebrated across the world. New Zealand was the first to welcome the new year. The islanders from the Antipodes experienced midnight hour noon. They celebrated this special moment with a fireworks show launched from the more than 300-meter Sky Tower in Auckland. The traditional show returned after a hiatus caused by the coronavirus pandemic. 2 hours later, the year 2023 was welcomed by residents of Sydney, Australia. As always, they did it with tremendous flair. Thousands of fireworks were launched from the Harbour Bridge and the iconic Opera House during a 12-minute dazzling display. The new year has already greeted Indonesia, Japan, and China, among others. Now Indians are preparing for its lavish welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please stay tuned for Poland Daily Weather, Poland Daily Business, and some of our other programs. But for me, it's have a wonderful evening.